The cookie jar slipped from my hands like a betrayal waiting to happen. I'm Rowan Kerrick, 42 years old, and I've been dispensing medications at Hartwell Regional Pharmacy for the past 15 years. My hands don't shake. They never have. But when my wife Ember handed me that ceramic jar this morning, something felt wrong. Not the weight, that was perfect, like always. Not the smell. Vanilla and cinnamon wafted through the lid, just like her grandmother's recipe promised. Something else entirely. "Take these to Lyra," Ember had said, her smile bright as fresh snow. "She's been working so hard at the hospital lately. Thought she could use a treat." My sister Lyra worked as a nurse coordinator at Hartwell General, pulling 12-hour shifts that would crush most people. She lived on coffee and determination, but she always made time for Ember's baking. Everyone did. My wife had a gift for making people feel special, one perfectly crafted dessert at a time. The jar hit the pharmacy's breakroom floor with a sound like thunder in a small space. Ceramic shards scattered across the linoleum, and a dozen oatmeal raisin cookies tumbled out like secrets spilling from a locked drawer. "Rowan!" Tony Marchetti, my pharmacy tech, jumped back from the coffee machine. "What the heck, man? You never drop anything." I stared at the mess, my mind trying to process what had just happened. My hands were steady now, but they'd been trembling when I held that jar. Why? I bent down to start cleaning up, muttering apologies. That's when Tony crouched beside me and picked up one of the intact cookies. He was always hungry, always ready to sample whatever treats people brought to work. I watched him examine it, turning it over in his palm like he was inspecting a prescription bottle. His face went white. "Rowan," he said quietly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This isn't a cookie." "What do you mean it's not a cookie? It's obviously a cookie. My wife made—" "No." Tony stood up fast, still holding the cookie. "I mean, yes, it's a cookie, but look at this." He pointed to small, crystalline flecks embedded in the surface. "See these granules? They're not sugar. They're not salt. They're not supposed to be in food." My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to call an ambulance, right now, and we need to call your sister." Tony had been working in pharmacies for 20 years before he came to us. He'd seen everything from mislabeled medications to contaminated compounds. If he was worried, there was a reason. I pulled out my phone with hands that were definitely shaking now. Lyra's number was on speed dial, had been since she started working nights, and I worried about her driving home exhausted. "Lyra, it's Rowan. Where are you right now?" "I'm at work. Just finished my shift, actually." "Why do you sound weird?" "Don't eat anything Ember brought you. Don't touch any cookies. Don't—" The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Rowan, I already ate 2 of them, about an hour ago. They were sitting on the breakroom table with a note that said they were from you and Ember." The world tilted sideways. "How do you feel?" "Fine, a little tired, but I always am after a long shift. Why are you asking me this?" "Just stay where you are. Don't drive home. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming to get you." "Rowan, you're scaring me." "Good. Stay scared. Stay awake. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I hung up and looked at Tony, who was already dialing 911. "This is Tony Marchetti at Hartwell Regional Pharmacy. I need an ambulance sent to Hartwell General Hospital, to the nursing staff breakroom. We have a possible poisoning situation. The victim may not be showing symptoms yet, but we have evidence of contaminated food." While Tony handled the emergency call, I carefully gathered the remaining cookie pieces into an evidence bag, something we kept on hand for medication tampering cases. My pharmacist training kicked in, overriding the panic that wanted to consume me. Document everything. Preserve the evidence. Think like a scientist, not like a terrified brother. But underneath that professional calm, a darker thought was growing. Ember had specifically asked me to bring these cookies to Lyra. She'd made a point of mentioning how hard my sister had been working lately. And there was something else, something that had been bothering me for weeks. Lyra had been asking questions about Ember, about our marriage, about whether I was happy. "She's different when you're not around," Lyra had said just last week. Cold, like she's wearing a mask that slips when she thinks no one's watching. I'd defended my wife, of course, told Lyra she was imagining things. But now, staring at the contaminated cookies scattered across the pharmacy floor, I wondered if my sister had been trying to warn me about something I was too blind to see. My phone buzzed. A text from Ember. "Did you deliver the cookies? Hope Lyra enjoys them." The emoji looked like a tiny, mocking face. I drove to the hospital faster than I should have, but not fast enough to outrun the thoughts chasing me. When had Ember baked these cookies? "This morning," she'd said, but our kitchen had been spotless when I left for work. No mixing bowls in the sink, no flour on the counters, no lingering smell of baking. For someone who supposedly spent 2 hours making a batch of cookies, she'd cleaned up remarkably well. The hospital parking lot was already flashing with red and blue lights when I arrived. An ambulance sat near the emergency entrance, its back doors open like a mouth waiting to swallow someone I cared about. I found Lyra in the ER, sitting on a gurney while Dr. Maddie Chalmers, my ex-girlfriend from college, now the head of emergency medicine, checked her vital signs. Lyra looked pale but alert, her dark hair pulled back in the messy bun she always wore after long shifts. "Rowan!" She reached for me as I approached. "What's going on? Nobody will tell me anything except that I might have eaten something dangerous." Dr. Chalmers looked up from her chart. "Hello, Rowan. We're running a full toxicology panel, but your sister's presenting normally so far. Heart rate slightly elevated, but that could be stress. What about the cookies? Did you test them?" "We sent samples to the lab. Results should be back within the hour." Maddie's expression was professionally neutral, but I caught the concern in her eyes. "Tony described some unusual crystalline material in the baking. Can you think of any reason why your wife's cookies might contain non-food substances?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't been discovered yet. I looked at Lyra, who was watching me with growing alarm. "I don't know," I said, which was technically true. I didn't know for certain, but I was starting to suspect, and the suspicion felt like poison in my own stomach. "The lab will tell us everything we need to know," Maddie said. "In the meantime, we're keeping Lyra for observation. Standard protocol for potential poisoning cases." Lyra grabbed my hand. "Rowan, I'm scared. Why would someone want to hurt me?" I squeezed her hand, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Nobody wants to hurt you. This is probably just a mistake. Maybe Ember accidentally used the wrong ingredient, or something got contaminated during baking." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Ember was meticulous about her baking. She measured ingredients with the precision of a chemist, followed recipes like they were sacred texts. She didn't make mistakes. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Ember. "Haven't heard back from you. Is everything okay? Did Lyra like the cookies?" I stared at the message, reading it 3 times. The tone was wrong. Too casual, too insistent, like she was fishing for information rather than just being friendly. "I need to make a phone call," I told Lyra. "I'll be right back." I stepped into the hallway and dialed Ember's number. She answered on the first ring. "Rowan, I was getting worried. How did the cookie delivery go?" "There was an accident. I dropped the jar at work." A pause, just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "Oh no, were they ruined?" "Most of them. Lyra managed to eat a couple before I got there, though." Another pause. "That's good. I mean, it's good that she got to try them before the accident. I worked really hard on that batch." "When exactly did you make them, Ember? I didn't see any baking supplies when I left this morning." "I got up early. You know how I am when I'm inspired to bake. I had everything cleaned up before you woke up." It was plausible. Ember did sometimes bake at odd hours, but something in her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for this conversation. "Well, I should get back to work," she said. "Let me know if Lyra wants another batch. I still have plenty of ingredients." The call ended, and I stood in the hospital hallway, feeling like I'd just spoken to a stranger wearing my wife's voice. Dr. Chalmers appeared beside me holding a tablet. "Rowan, we need to talk. The preliminary lab results are back." We walked to her office, a small space filled with medical texts and coffee cups. She closed the door before speaking. The cookies contained oleander extract, a significant amount. My legs went weak. From my pharmaceutical training, I knew oleander was extremely dangerous. Even tiny amounts could trigger severe cardiac complications. How much did Lyra eat? She estimates about 2 cookies. The concentration was high enough to be dangerous, but not immediately lethal. She's going to be okay, but she needs to stay here for monitoring. "This wasn't an accident," I said. "No," Maddie agreed. "It wasn't. Oleander doesn't accidentally end up in cookie dough. Someone put it there deliberately. What do we do now?" "I've already called the police. They'll want to question you and your wife about the cookies. And Rowan?" She touched my shoulder gently. "Be careful. If someone tried to poison your sister, you might be in danger too." I drove home through streets that looked exactly the same as they had this morning, but felt completely different. Every familiar landmark seemed like part of a life that belonged to someone else, someone naive enough to believe that his wife baked cookies out of love instead of malice. Our house sat on Maple Street, a colonial-style home with blue shutters and a perfectly maintained garden. Ember's car was in the driveway, which meant she was home from her job at Morrison Public Relations. She'd probably be in the kitchen, preparing dinner and asking about my day like she did every evening. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to decide how to handle this. Should I confront her directly, call the police first, pretend I didn't know anything and try to gather more evidence? My phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Marla Givens from the Hartwell Police Department. "Mr. Kerrick, this is Detective Givens. I understand there was an incident involving your wife's baking and your sister. I'd like to speak with you and Mrs. Kerrick as soon as possible." "I'm just getting home now. My wife should be here." "Good. We'll be there in about 10 minutes. Please don't discuss the situation with your wife before we arrive." The line went quiet, leaving me alone with the weight of what was about to happen. In 10 minutes, police would be at my door asking my wife why she'd tried to poison my sister, and I still didn't understand why she'd done it. But as I sat there, staring at our house, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even realized existed began falling into place. Ember's recent mood changes, her sudden interest in Lyra's work schedule, the way she'd been asking questions about my sister's personal life. And then there was Hayes Kerrick, my sister's husband, my brother-in-law, and recently, a frequent topic of Ember's conversations. She'd been mentioning him a lot lately, how hard he was working, how stressed he seemed, how much he appreciated having family support during difficult times. I'd thought she was just being caring. Now I wondered if there was something else going on. My hands were steady again as I got out of the car and walked toward the house. Whatever was waiting for me inside, I was ready to face it. Or at least, I thought I was. The front door opened before I reached it. Ember stood there smiling, wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless despite having worked a full day. "Welcome home, honey. How was your day?" I looked into her green eyes and realized I was looking at a stranger. "My day was interesting," I said, stepping past Ember into our foyer. "How was yours?" She closed the door and followed me toward the kitchen. "Oh, you know, the usual client meetings and campaign planning. Nothing too exciting." She paused by the granite counter where she'd supposedly baked the cookies this morning. "Did Lyra enjoy the treats?" I watched her face carefully as I answered. "She ate some of them. We'll have to see how she feels later." "Good." I hoped they brightened her day. Ember moved to the refrigerator and started pulling out ingredients for dinner. I was thinking about making that chicken dish you like, the one with the herbs. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal. Here was my wife, planning dinner and making small talk, less than 6 hours after trying to poison my sister. If the lab results were wrong, if this was all some terrible misunderstanding, then I was about to destroy my marriage based on paranoid suspicions. But the lab results weren't wrong. Oleander didn't accidentally end up in cookie dough. Actually, Ember, we need to talk about something. She turned from the refrigerator, still holding a package of chicken. What's wrong? You look upset. There was a problem with the cookies. Lyra got sick after eating them. Ember's face shifted through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, concern, confusion. If I hadn't been watching for it, I might have missed the split second of something else. Relief? Satisfaction? Her hand paused mid-motion over the cutting board, fingers still curled around the knife, as if her body had frozen before her mind could catch up. The kitchen smelled like garlic and warm oil, the mundane normalcy of it clashing violently with the dread pooling in my chest. I kept my eyes on her, forcing myself not to blink, cataloging every twitch of her mouth, every tightening muscle along her jaw. Sick? What kind of sick? Is she okay? The concern sounded practiced, pitched just right. I swallowed, my throat dry, and felt the weight of the moment settle into my shoulders. She's at the hospital. They're running tests. The hospital? Ember set down the chicken and moved toward me. Rowan, that's terrible. What do they think happened? She closed the distance between us, reaching out instinctively, as if comfort were a reflex she couldn't turn off. I stepped back, the tile cool beneath my bare feet. They think someone poisoned her. The word hung between us like a blade. Ember's face went pale, and she reached for the counter, as if she needed support. Her knuckles whitened against the laminate. For a heartbeat, I wondered if she might actually faint. Her breathing went shallow, quick, and her eyes darted, not to me, but toward the hallway, the back door, anywhere but my face. Poisoned? That's impossible. Who would want to hurt Lyra? Her laugh was thin, brittle, cracking at the edges. I could hear the refrigerator hum behind us, the clock ticking too loudly on the wall. The police are coming here to ask us some questions. They should be here any minute. Her head snapped back toward me, eyes sharp now, alert. The police? Why would they want to talk to us? Because the poison was in your cookies. Ember stared at me for a long moment. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, like a storm about to break. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder. That's ridiculous. My cookies don't have poison in them. If Lyra got sick, it was from something else. Maybe she ate something bad at the hospital cafeteria. The denial came too fast, layered with irritation, as if outrage might bulldoze over reality. The lab tested the cookies, Ember. They found oleander extract. That's impossible. I don't even know what oleander is. She shook her head, lips pressed tight, but her pupils had blown wide. But her eyes said otherwise. There was recognition there, quickly suppressed, but not quickly enough. The doorbell rang. The sound cut cleanly through the tension, sharp and final. Ember flinched despite herself. That'll be the police, I said. Ember smoothed her dress and checked her reflection in the microwave door. This is just a misunderstanding. Once they realize I would never hurt anyone, especially not Lyra, we can put this whole thing behind us. I opened the door to find Detective Givens, a woman in her 40s with gray-streaked hair and intelligent eyes, standing next to a younger officer whose nameplate read, Patterson. Mr. Kerrick, I'm Detective Givens. This is Officer Patterson. May we come in? Of course. I stepped aside and led them to the living room, where Ember was already seated on the couch, her hands folded in her lap like she was posing for a portrait. Mrs. Kerrick? Detective Givens said, settling into the armchair across from her. I understand you baked some cookies for your sister-in-law today. Yes, I did. Oatmeal raisin. They're one of Lyra's favorites. Ember's voice was steady, concerned, but not defensive. Can you walk me through the baking process? When did you start? What ingredients did you use? That sort of thing. I got up early, around 5:30. I like to bake when the house is quiet. I use my grandmother's recipe: flour, oats, brown sugar, eggs, butter, vanilla, cinnamon, and raisins. Nothing unusual. Where did you get the ingredients? Most of them I had on hand. I think I bought the raisins at Morrison's Market earlier this week. Detective Givens made notes on her tablet. Did anyone else have access to the cookies between when you baked them and when your husband took them to work? No, just me. I packed them in the jar myself and gave them to Rowan this morning. Mrs. Kerrick, are you familiar with a plant called oleander? Ember's pause was barely perceptible. I don't think so. Is that some kind of herb? It's a flowering shrub, very toxic. We found significant amounts of oleander extract in the cookies. That's impossible. Ember's voice rose slightly. I told you what I put in them. There was no oleander or whatever you said. The lab results are quite clear. Someone added oleander extract to those cookies. Ember turned to me, her eyes wide. Rowan, tell them I would never do something like that. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment where I either supported my wife or threw her to the wolves. 6 hours ago, the choice would have been obvious. I don't know what to think, I said honestly. Detective Givens continued questioning Ember for another 20 minutes, but my wife stuck to her story. She'd baked normal cookies using normal ingredients. She had no idea how oleander extract could have gotten into them. She was devastated that Lyra had been hurt and wanted to help the investigation in any way she could. It was a convincing performance. If I hadn't known about the lab results, I might have believed her myself. After the police left, Ember and I sat in our living room in silence. The space felt different now, charged with unspoken accusations and denials. They think I tried to poison your sister, Ember said finally. Did you? She looked at me like I'd slapped her. How can you even ask me that? Because someone put oleander in those cookies, and you're the only one who had access to them. Maybe someone tampered with them after I baked them, maybe someone at your pharmacy. No one at the pharmacy had access to them except me and Tony. And Tony's the one who recognized that something was wrong. Ember stood up abruptly. I can't believe you're taking their side over mine. I'm your wife, Rowan. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me. That's why I need to understand what happened. What happened is that someone is trying to frame me, and instead of supporting me, you're helping them do it. She stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with my doubts and suspicions. But doubt was a luxury I couldn't afford. If Ember had tried to poison Lyra once, she might try again. I needed to know the truth, and I needed to know it fast. I spent the next hour going through our house like a detective. I started in the kitchen, looking for any trace of oleander or evidence of unusual baking activity. The surfaces were spotless, but that proved nothing. Ember was always meticulous about cleaning. In the garage, I found something interesting. A small paper bag from Hartwell Garden Center, dated 3 days ago. The receipt was still inside. Oleander plant, $12.99. My hands shook as I read the receipt. Ember had bought an oleander plant 3 days before baking the cookies. That wasn't a coincidence. But where was the plant now? I searched the garage, the basement, even our small backyard garden. No oleander anywhere. I was about to give up when I noticed our garbage cans were missing from their usual spot beside the garage. Trash pickup wasn't until tomorrow, but the cans were gone. Ember had disposed of the evidence. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the letter drop bar on 5th Street. Come alone. D. I stared at the message, trying to figure out who D could be. Then it hit me. Dean Morrison, my old college roommate who'd become a private investigator after a brief career as a police officer. We'd lost touch over the years, but he still lived in Hartwell. The letter drop was exactly the kind of place Dean would choose for a clandestine meeting. A dive bar on the wrong side of town, the kind of place where people minded their own business and conversations stayed private. I found Dean in a corner booth, nursing a beer and looking like he'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen him. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and his face had the weathered look of someone who'd seen too much of the world's ugliness. "Rowan, thanks for coming. How did you know about—" Word travels fast in a town this size, especially when it involves potential murder. He gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Sit down. We need to talk." "What do you know about this?" "More than you might expect. I've been keeping an eye on your wife for the past month." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, keeping an eye on her?" "Someone hired me to investigate her. I can't tell you who, but I can tell you what I found." Dean pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. "Take a look." Inside were photographs. Ember entering and leaving a downtown apartment building. Ember having lunch with a man I recognized as Hayes, my sister's husband. Ember and Hayes kissing in the parking lot behind Morrison's Market. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "At least 6 weeks, maybe longer. They've been careful, but not careful enough." I stared at the photographs, feeling like I was looking at evidence from someone else's life. "Who hired you to follow her?" "I can't tell you that. Client confidentiality. But I can tell you that someone suspected this affair and wanted proof." "Lyra?" Dean didn't answer, but his expression told me everything I needed to know. "She knew," I said. "Lyra knew about Ember and Hayes, and that's why Ember tried to poison her." "That would be my guess. Your sister was getting too close to the truth, so your wife decided to eliminate the problem." I felt sick, not just because of the betrayal, but because of how close Ember had come to succeeding. If Tony hadn't noticed the oleander crystals, if I hadn't dropped that jar, Lyra might be lying in the morgue right now instead of recovering in a hospital bed. "What do I do now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want justice, or do you want revenge?" "What's the difference?" "Justice means letting the police handle this. You give them the evidence, they arrest your wife, and she goes to prison. Clean and simple." "And revenge?" Dean's smile was cold. "Revenge means making sure she loses everything that matters to her. Her marriage, her reputation, her lover, her freedom, everything." I thought about Ember standing in our kitchen, lying to my face while planning my sister's demise. I thought about the photographs of her with Hayes, the oleander receipt, the calculated way she'd tried to frame the poisoning as an accident. "Tell me about revenge," I said. Dean leaned forward. "First, we need to gather more evidence. The oleander receipt is good, but we need something that directly connects her to the poisoning attempt. Phone records, computer searches, maybe audio or video evidence." "How do we get that?" "Leave that to me, I have some ideas. But I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Go home and act normal. Don't let her know you suspect anything. If she thinks you're onto her, she'll either run or try to eliminate you too." The thought sent a chill through me. "You think she'd try to hurt me?" "Rowan, she tried to poison your sister to cover up an affair. What do you think she'd do to you if she thought you were going to expose her?" I left the letter drop with Dean's folder hidden in my jacket and my mind spinning with plans and possibilities. The drive home felt like traveling through enemy territory. Every familiar street corner and neighborhood landmark looked different now, tainted by the knowledge that my wife was capable of attempted murder. Ember was in bed when I got home, apparently asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her peaceful expression and trying to reconcile this image with the woman who'd baked oleander into cookies. She looked innocent in sleep, vulnerable, like the woman I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. But appearances were deceiving. I was learning that the hard way. I went to my home office and locked the door behind me. Then I opened Dean's folder and studied the photographs again, looking for details I might have missed. In one image, Ember and Hayes were sitting in his car outside what looked like a motel. The timestamp showed it was taken last Tuesday, the same day Ember had told me she was working late on a client presentation. Another photograph showed them entering Hayes' apartment building together. That one was dated 3 days ago, the same day Ember had bought the oleander plant. The timeline was becoming clear. Ember and Hayes had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The poisoning wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated attempt to eliminate the one person who threatened their relationship. My phone buzzed with a text from Dean. "Check your email. Sent you something interesting." I opened my laptop and found a message with an audio file attached. The file name was simply Ember Hayes Conversation MP3. I put on headphones and hit play. "Sure this will work?" Hayes' voice, nervous and strained. "Trust me, it'll look like an allergic reaction or food poisoning. No one will suspect anything." Ember's voice, calm and confident. "But what if someone figures out?" "They won't. I've researched this thoroughly. The symptoms mimic a dozen different conditions. By the time anyone thinks to test for oleander, it'll be too late." "What about Rowan? Won't he be suspicious?" "Rowan trusts me completely. He'll never suspect his loving wife of hurting his precious sister." The recording continued for another minute, with Ember and Hayes discussing their plan in detail. When it ended, I sat in my office chair, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. My wife hadn't just tried to poison my sister. She'd mocked my trust while planning to do it. I forwarded the recording to Detective Givens with a note. "This was recorded 3 days ago. I believe it's my wife and brother-in-law discussing their plan to poison my sister." Then I sat back and waited for my world to explode. The explosion came at 6:30 the next morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when police cars surrounded our house. Through the window, I counted 4 cruisers and an unmarked sedan, their red and blue lights painting our quiet street in alternating colors of emergency. Ember appeared in the doorway, still in her nightgown, her hair disheveled from sleep. "Rowan, what's happening? Why are there police cars outside?" "I think they're here for you." She stared at me, and I watched understanding dawn in her green eyes. Not confusion or fear, understanding. She knew exactly why the police were here. "You did this," she said quietly. "You tried to poison my sister. You have no proof of that." "Actually, I do." The doorbell rang, followed immediately by heavy knocking. Detective Givens's voice carried through the door. "Police! Open up!" I walked to the front door, with Ember trailing behind me. When I opened it, Detective Givens stepped inside with 3 other officers, all of them wearing the grim expressions of people about to ruin someone's day. "Mrs. Kerrick," Detective Givens said, "you're under arrest for the attempted poisoning of Lyra Kerrick." "This is ridiculous," Ember said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I told you yesterday I didn't poison anyone. We have new evidence that says otherwise." Detective Givens nodded to one of the officers, who stepped forward with handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the officer cuffed her, Ember turned to me with an expression of pure hatred. "This isn't over, Rowan. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done. I've stopped you from hurting my family." "Your family?" Ember laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through our foyer. "Your precious sister isn't the innocent victim you think she is, and neither are you." The officers led her outside, and I watched through the window as they put her in the back of a police car. Neighbors had started gathering on their front lawns, drawn by the commotion. By noon, everyone in Hartwell would know that Ember Kerrick had been arrested for attempted murder. Detective Givens stayed behind after the other officers left. We'll need you to come to the station later today to give a formal statement about the evidence you provided. What about Hayes? Are you arresting him too? We're bringing him in for questioning. The recording you sent us implicates him as an accessory, but we need to determine the extent of his involvement. After Detective Givens left, I stood alone in my house, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had been built on lies. Everything looked the same. The furniture Ember had chosen, the photographs of our supposedly happy marriage, the kitchen where she'd baked poisoned cookies, but it all felt hollow now. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Hayes's name. Rowan? What the hell is going on? The police just showed up at my office asking questions about Ember. Where are you now? I'm at home. They said I needed to come to the station this afternoon for questioning. What did you tell them? I told them the truth. A long pause. What truth? About you and Ember. About the affair. About the plan to poison Lyra. You're insane. There is no affair. And nobody tried to poison anyone. I have recordings, Hayes. I have photographs. I have receipts for the oleander plant. I know everything. Another pause, longer this time. When Hayes spoke again, his voice was different, desperate. Rowan, listen to me. You don't understand the situation. Ember, she's not who you think she is. She manipulated me. She made me believe that Lyra was going to destroy our families if we didn't stop her. So you decided to poison her. No, I never agreed to poison anyone. Ember said she was just going to make Lyra sick enough to miss work for a few days. She said it would give us time to figure out how to handle the situation. The situation being your affair? It wasn't supposed to be an affair. It just happened. Lyra was working so much, and Ember was having problems with you, and we started talking. One thing led to another. And when Lyra started getting suspicious, you decided she had to go. I didn't decide anything. Ember came up with the whole plan. She said Lyra was going to ruin both our marriages, that she was jealous of what we had. I almost laughed. What you had? You mean sneaking around behind your wife's back while my wife planned to poison her? You don't understand. Ember can be very persuasive. She made it seem like we didn't have any other choice. There's always a choice, Hayes. You chose to cheat on my sister. Ember chose to try to poison her. Now you both get to live with the consequences. Rowan, please. We can work this out. Ember's going to blame everything on me when the police question her. She'll say I forced her to do it. You know how convincing she can be. He was right about that. Ember could sell ice to polar bears when she wanted to, but she'd already been caught on tape discussing the poisoning plan. No amount of charm was going to explain that away. Good luck with that, I said, and hung up. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and police interviews. I gave my statement at the station, handed over the evidence Dean had gathered, and answered what felt like 100 questions about my marriage and my relationship with my sister. Detective Givens told me that Ember was being held without bail, pending a psychiatric evaluation. The recording I'd provided, combined with the oleander receipt and witness testimony from Tony at the pharmacy, had given them enough evidence to charge her with attempted murder. Hayes had been released after questioning, but he was still under investigation as a potential accessory. His story kept changing. First, he denied any involvement. Then he claimed Ember had manipulated him. Then he tried to suggest that the whole thing was my fault for being a neglectful husband. I drove to the hospital to check on Lyra. She was being discharged that afternoon, cleared by the doctors, but emotionally shaken by the revelation that her sister-in-law had tried to poison her. I keep thinking about all the times I ate Ember's baking, she said, as I helped her gather her things. How many times did she try to hurt me before this? Probably just this once. The doctors would have detected oleander poisoning in routine dirt work if it had happened before. But why, Rowan? What did I ever do to her? I hesitated, not sure how much to tell her about the affair, but she deserved to know the truth. She was having an affair with Hayes. You were getting suspicious, asking questions. She saw you as a threat. Lyra sat down heavily on the hospital bed. Hayes? My Hayes? I'm sorry. I know this is a lot to process. How long has it been going on? At least 6 weeks, maybe longer. Dean Morrison was investigating them. He has photographs. Lyra stared at the floor for a long moment. When she looked up, her eyes were dry but hard. I want to see them. The photographs. Are you sure that's a good idea? I need to see them. I need to know how long my husband has been lying to me. We drove to Dean's office in silence. Lyra studied the photographs with the same clinical detachment she used when reviewing patient charts at the hospital. When she finished, she handed them back to Dean without comment. What are you going to do? I asked as we left Dean's office. I don't know yet. Right now, I just want to go home and try to make sense of all this. Do you want me to stay with you? In case Hayes comes home? No, I need to face him alone. I dropped Lyra at her house and drove home through streets that looked different in the late afternoon light. The police cars were gone, but I could see neighbors peeking through their curtains as I pulled into my driveway. The house felt enormous and empty without Ember. I wandered through rooms that still smelled like her perfume, past furniture we'd chosen together, under photographs of happier times that now seemed like elaborate lies. In our bedroom, I found her laptop sitting open on the dresser. The police had probably already searched it, but I was curious about what they might have found. The browser history revealed meticulous preparation, searches like oleander effects, signs of plant-related illness, how long oleander traces remained detectable, and natural cardiac causes showed she had been investigating this for weeks. But there was something else in the history that caught my attention. Multiple searches for how to frame someone for poisoning and can fingerprints be planted on evidence. Ember hadn't just been planning to poison Lyra. She'd been planning to frame someone else for it, probably me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife says hello. She wants you to know that this isn't over. A friend. I stared at the message, trying to figure out who might have sent it. Ember was in jail. Hayes was presumably dealing with his own problems, and I couldn't think of anyone else who might be acting on her behalf, unless she had other allies I didn't know about. The thought was disturbing. How many people had Ember manipulated over the years? How many secrets had she kept? How many lies had she told? I was beginning to realize that I'd never really known my wife at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The settling of old wood, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic on the main road. I kept expecting to hear footsteps in the hallway or the sound of a key in the front door. Around midnight, my phone rang. The sound cut through the apartment with a shrill insistence, vibrating across the nightstand and pulling me out of the shallow half-sleep I'd been drifting in. The room was dark except for the faint amber glow of the streetlight leaking through the blinds, striping the ceiling. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, heart already starting to thud as if it knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The caller ID showed Hartwell County Jail. This is a collect call from an inmate at Hartwell County Jail. Will you accept the charges? The recorded voice sounded sterile, indifferent, like this was just another transaction. Another name on a list. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could almost feel the weight of the day pressing back in. Hospital corridors, Lyra's pale face against white sheets, the endless loop of what-ifs gnawing at me. I almost hung up, but curiosity won out over caution. Yes, I'll accept. There was a click, a faint rush of static, the sound of a line connecting across distance and steel doors. I sat up, pulling the sheet around my waist, bracing myself without really knowing for what. Rowan? Ember's voice, sounding smaller and more fragile than I'd ever heard it. The name hit like a reflexive flinch. I closed my eyes, jaw tightening, picturing her the way she used to look when she wanted sympathy. Shoulders drawn in, voice carefully unsteady. What do you want, Ember? I want to explain. I want you to understand why I did what I did. I let out a short, humorless breath, staring at the wall as if it might give me patience I didn't have. You tried to poison my sister so you could keep sleeping with her husband. What's to understand? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant for anyone to get seriously hurt. Her words came faster now, overlapping slightly, as if she could outrun what she'd done just by saying enough. I could hear the echo in the background, the hollow acoustics of a place built to keep people contained. You added oleander to the cookies, Ember. Oleander is extremely dangerous. What did you expect would happen? I researched the dosage carefully. I only used enough to make her sick, not to hurt her permanently. The pause before the last word was sharp, deliberate. I pressed my free hand into my knee, fingers digging in. So you're saying you only tried to poison her a little bit? I'm saying I was desperate. Hayes and I. What we have is real, Rowan. It's not just some sordid affair. We love each other. The way she said love made my stomach twist, like she'd stolen a word that no longer belonged to her. Then you should have divorced me, and he should have divorced Lyra. You didn't have to try to poison anyone. Lyra would have made that impossible. She would have fought the divorce, tried to take everything Hayes had worked for. She would have made our lives miserable. I pictured Lyra arguing over nothing more serious than paint colors, the idea of her as some vindictive mastermind feeling grotesquely wrong. So, your solution was attempted murder. It wasn't murder, it was just, I don't know what it was. I wasn't thinking clearly. The lie sat there between us, heavy and obvious. You researched oleander toxicity for weeks, Ember. You planned this down to the last detail. That's not the behavior of someone who wasn't thinking clearly. A long pause. I could hear her breathing now, uneven, as if she were recalibrating. What do you want me to say, Rowan? That I'm sorry? I am sorry. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry you got hurt. I'm sorry Lyra got hurt. Her apologies sounded arranged, stacked carefully in a row. None of them reached where they were supposed to. But you're not sorry you did it. Another pause. This one stretched, taut enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then softly, no. I'm not sorry I tried to fight for my happiness. Your happiness was going to cost my sister her life. Your sister was going to cost me everything I cared about. The line went quiet for a moment. The silence hummed, filled only by the faint electrical buzz of the call. When Ember spoke again, her voice had changed. The fragility was gone, replaced by something harder. You think you've won, don't you? You think you've gotten your revenge. I straightened, a cold clarity settling in my chest. I think I've gotten justice. Justice? Ember laughed. The sound was sharp, brittle. Rowan, you have no idea what's coming. You think this ends with me in jail? You think Hayes is just going to disappear and leave you all alone to play the victim? A chill slid down my spine, the kind that doesn't come from words alone, but from the certainty behind them. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you're not as innocent as you pretend to be. I'm talking about the fact that there are things about you that your precious sister doesn't know. My stomach clenched, a visceral tightening that stole my breath for a second. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, the room suddenly too small. What things? Ask yourself this, Rowan. Why do you think Dean Morrison was really investigating me? Who do you think hired him? I sat in my dark bedroom, staring at the phone and trying to make sense of Ember's words. She was obviously trying to manipulate me, to plant seeds of doubt and paranoia. But there was something in her tone that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. Why had Dean been investigating Ember? He'd said someone hired him but wouldn't tell me who. I'd assumed it was Lyra, but what if I was wrong? And what did Ember mean about things Lyra didn't know about me? I tried to push the questions out of my mind, but they lingered like smoke from a fire that wouldn't go out. Ember was a master manipulator, and even from jail, she was still trying to control the narrative. But what if she wasn't lying this time? What if there really were secrets I didn't know about? I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more surprises were waiting for me in the wreckage of my marriage. The next morning brought the kind of small-town attention I'd been dreading. By the time I left for work, 3 news vans were parked on my street, and reporters were knocking on neighbors' doors asking for comments about the poisoning case. At the pharmacy, Tony greeted me with a mixture of sympathy and barely concealed excitement. "Dude, you're famous. Channel 8 wants to interview you about how you discovered the poisoned cookies." "I'm not talking to any reporters." "Come on, man, you're a hero. You saved your sister's life." "I didn't save anyone. I just dropped a jar of cookies." But Tony was right about one thing. The story was spreading fast. By noon, it seemed like everyone in Hartwell knew that Ember Kerrick had been arrested for trying to poison her sister-in-law. The pharmacy's phone rang constantly with calls from curious customers wanting to know if the rumors were true. Around midday, Dean Morrison appeared at the pharmacy counter. "We need to talk," he murmured. "Not here. Meet me at the letter drop tonight at 8. "What's this about?" "Your wife's phone call last night. Someone recorded it." My stomach dropped. "How do you know about that?" "Because I have sources in the jail, and because Ember made some interesting claims that we need to discuss." The rest of the workday dragged by like a prison sentence. Every customer who came in seemed to be staring at me, and I caught fragments of whispered conversations about poison and affairs and attempted murder. At 6 o'clock, my sister called. "Rowan, we need to talk. Can you come over?" "Is everything okay? You sound upset." "Just come over, please." Lyra's house sat on the opposite side of town from mine, in a neighborhood of modest ranch homes with well-maintained lawns. Hayes's truck wasn't in the driveway, which I took as a good sign. I found Lyra in her kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and a manila folder. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Where's Hayes?" I asked. "Gone. He packed a bag this morning and said he was staying at his brother's place until this all gets sorted out. How are you holding up?" "I've been better." She gestured to the folder. "I've been thinking about what Ember said on that phone call last night." "You heard about that?" "Detective Givens played me the recording. She wanted to know if I had any idea what Ember meant about secrets you were keeping." My chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't know what Ember was talking about. But that's not entirely true, is it?" Lyra opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers, bank statements, credit card bills, and what looked like legal documents. "I've been going through Hayes's papers, trying to figure out our financial situation before I decide what to do about the marriage. And I found some interesting things." She spread the papers across the table. "Look at these credit card charges. 3 payments to Morrison Investigations, totaling $1,500. The first payment was made 6 weeks ago." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. Hayes hired Dean to investigate Ember? That's what it looks like. But why would he hire someone to investigate his own lover? Maybe he was having second thoughts about the affair. Maybe he wanted to know if she was seeing other people too. Or maybe, Lyra said quietly, he was working with someone else. Someone who wanted dirt on Ember. The implication hung in the air between us. Lyra was suggesting that I had hired Dean to investigate my wife and that I'd somehow manipulated Hayes into helping me. "Lyra, I swear to you, I had no idea Dean was investigating Ember until he contacted me yesterday. I thought you had hired him." "Why would you think that?" "Because he wouldn't tell me who his client was. He said it was confidential. When I pressed him, he implied that it was someone who suspected the affair." Lyra studied my face for a long moment. "I believe you. But someone paid Dean to investigate Ember, and it wasn't me. So who was it? Maybe Hayes was working alone. Maybe he was planning to use the information to blackmail Ember or something. Hayes isn't smart enough for blackmail. He can barely balance a checkbook. She was right about that. Hayes had always struck me as the kind of guy who thought with his muscles instead of his brain. The idea of him orchestrating a complex investigation seemed far-fetched. "There's something else," Lyra said. She pulled out another document, a life insurance policy. "Hayes increased my life insurance coverage 3 months ago. The payout is now $200,000. The pieces of a darker puzzle began falling into place. "You think Hayes and Ember were planning to collect on your life insurance?" "I think they were planning to poison me with something that would look like a heart attack or natural causes. When that didn't work, they switched to oleander and hoped it would still look accidental. But the oleander was obviously deliberate. No one would mistake that for natural causes. Unless they were planning to frame someone else for it." Lyra looked at me meaningfully. "Someone with access to pharmaceutical knowledge and a motive to hurt me." The room seemed to spin around me. "They were going to frame me?" "Think about it, Rowan. You had access to oleander through your pharmacy connections. You delivered the cookies personally. If I had eaten them and collapsed, who would the police have suspected first? But I dropped the jar. Tony was the one who noticed the poison. That was an accident. If you hadn't dropped them, I would have eaten the cookies at home, alone. By the time someone found me, the evidence would have been gone, and you would have been the obvious suspect." I sat down heavily in one of Lyra's kitchen chairs, trying to process what she was telling me. "So, Ember and Hayes were planning to poison you, frame me for it, and collect the insurance money? It makes sense. With you in prison and me gone, they could be together without any interference, and Hayes would have $200,000 to start their new life. But why would Hayes pay Dean to investigate Ember if they were working together?" Lyra smiled grimly. Maybe they weren't working together. Maybe Hayes was planning to double-cross her. The idea was diabolical, but plausible. Hayes investigates Ember's affair, gathers evidence of her infidelity, then uses that evidence to control her or eliminate her after she helps him poison me and collect the insurance money. "We need to tell Detective Givens about this," I said. "I already did. She's reopening the investigation to look at Hayes as a primary suspect instead of just an accessory." My phone buzzed with a text from Dean. "Change of plans. Meet me at the Riverside Motel, room 12, instead of the bar. Come alone and don't tell anyone where you're going." I showed the message to Lyra. "That's weird. Why would he want to meet at a motel?" "I don't like this, Rowan. What if it's not really from Dean? Who else would it be from? Hayes, Ember, someone working for one of them." She was right to be suspicious. The message felt wrong somehow, too secretive, too urgent. "I'm calling Dean directly," I said, pulling up his number. The call went straight to voicemail. "You've reached Dean Morrison. Leave a message." "Dean, it's Rowan. I got your text about meeting at the motel. Call me back to confirm." While we waited for Dean to call back, Lyra made dinner, and we tried to have a normal conversation about anything other than poison and affairs and insurance fraud. But the weight of everything that had happened hung over us like storm clouds. At 8:30, my phone rang. Dean's number. "Rowan, I got your message. What text are you talking about? I never sent you any text about a motel." "Someone using your name told me to meet them at the Riverside Motel, room 12. "That's not good. Don't go anywhere near that place. Where are you now?" "At Lyra's house." "Stay there. I'm calling Detective Givens. Someone's trying to lure you into a trap." I looked at Lyra with growing alarm. "Someone's impersonating Dean. They want me to go to that motel." "Why? What would be the point?" Before I could answer, we heard the sound of gravel crunching in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see headlights approaching the house. "Are you expecting anyone?" I asked. Lyra shook her head and moved to the window. "It's Hayes. He's back." "Should we call the police?" "Let's see what he wants first. Maybe he's here to confess or apologize or something." The front door opened. Hayes still had his key, and we heard his voice calling out, "Lyra, Are you home? We need to talk. In the kitchen, Lyra called back. Hayes appeared in the doorway, looking haggard and desperate. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes had the wild look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Lyra, thank God you're here. And Rowan, good. I need to talk to both of you. What do you want, Hayes? Lyra's voice was cold. I want to explain everything. I want to tell you the truth about what really happened. The truth? That's a novel concept coming from you. Hayes sat down at the table without being invited. I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to. But I need you to understand that I never wanted anyone to get hurt. You had an affair with my sister-in-law and helped her try to poison me. How is that not wanting anyone to get hurt? I didn't help her poison you. I didn't even know about the oleander until after you got sick. Then why did you increase my life insurance? Lyra pulled out the policy and slammed it on the table. Why were you paying a private investigator to follow Ember? Hayes stared at the insurance documents like they were written in a foreign language. I increased your insurance because my company was offering a discount on family policies. It seemed like a good idea. And the private investigator? I hired him because I was suspicious of Ember. She was acting strange, secretive. I thought maybe she was planning to leave Rowan and I wanted to know what she was up to. So you could blackmail her? So I could protect myself. Lyra, you have to understand, Ember is dangerous. She's not the sweet, innocent woman everyone thinks she is. She's manipulative and calculating and completely ruthless. And yet, you were sleeping with her. Hayes ran his hands through his hair. That was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. But I got caught up in her web, and by the time I realized what kind of person she really was, it was too late. What do you mean, too late? I mean she had compromising photos of us together. She had recordings of our conversations. She had enough evidence to destroy both our marriages, even if I tried to end the affair. Lyra and I exchanged glances. This was a different version of events than what we'd been assuming. Are you saying Ember was blackmailing you? I asked. Not blackmailing exactly, but she made it clear that if I tried to leave her, she would make sure both you and Lyra found out about the affair in the most humiliating way possible. So instead of ending it, you decided to help her poison my sister? I never helped her poison anyone. Hayes's voice rose to almost a shout. I didn't know about the oleander. I didn't know about any plan to hurt Lyra. I thought Ember was just going to find some way to discredit her or make her look unstable. How? I don't know. Ember never told me the details. She just said she had a plan to neutralize the threat that Lyra represented. And you didn't think to ask what that meant? Hayes looked down at the table. I didn't want to know. I thought if I didn't know the specifics, I couldn't be held responsible. That's convenient, Lyra said. It's the truth. And there's something else you need to know. Ember didn't just target Lyra. She was planning to frame Rowan for the poisoning. We already figured that out. But did you figure out that she was also planning to eliminate me once I'd served my purpose? That got our attention. What do you mean? I asked. Hayes pulled out his phone and showed us a text message. I got this yesterday, right after Ember was arrested. The message read, Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. You know what you have to do. E. She sent this from jail, Lyra asked. She must have someone on the outside helping her, someone who's continuing to follow her plan even though she's locked up. What's Phase 2? I think Phase 2 is getting rid of me. I know too much about her plans, and I'm a liability now that the police are investigating. So you came here to hide? I came here to warn you, because if Ember is willing to eliminate me, she's definitely willing to try again with both of you. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another text from the fake Dean Morrison number. Time's running out, Rowan. Room 12. Come alone, or your sister pays the price. I showed the message to Hayes and Lyra. Hayes went pale. That's her. That's Ember's style. She always gives ultimatums. But she's in jail, Lyra pointed out. She has help. I told you, someone on the outside is continuing her plan. Who? I don't know. But whoever it is, they're serious about finishing what Ember started. The three of us sat in Lyra's kitchen, staring at the threatening text message and trying to figure out our next move. Outside, the sun was setting, and shadows were growing longer across the yard. "We need to call Detective Givens," I said. "And tell her what? That my imprisoned wife is somehow still orchestrating attempts to hurt people? She'll think we're paranoid." "Better paranoid than hurt," Lyra said. But before any of us could reach for a phone, the lights went out. The house plunged into darkness so complete that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the sound of a car door slamming. "Someone's here," Hayes whispered. "The circuit breaker," Lyra said. "It's in the basement. Someone must have cut the power." "Or someone's in the basement," I said. We sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of our own breathing and the settling of the old house. Then, from somewhere near the front of the house, came the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the front porch. "Back door," Lyra whispered. "We can get out through the back door." But as we stood up to move, we heard another sound, the back door opening with a soft creak. We were trapped. "Upstairs," Lyra whispered, grabbing my arm. "There's a window in my bedroom that opens onto the garage roof." We moved as quietly as possible through the dark house, feeling our way along walls and furniture. Behind us, I could hear footsteps moving through the kitchen, slow and deliberate, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. The stairs creaked under our weight despite our attempts at stealth. Each sound seemed amplified in the darkness, and I was sure whoever was in the house could hear us moving. We reached Lyra's bedroom, and she immediately went to the window while Hayes and I listened at the door. The footsteps had reached the bottom of the stairs. "It's stuck," Lyra whispered, struggling with the window latch. "I never opened this thing." "Let me try," Hayes said, moving to help her. The footsteps started up the stairs, slow, measured steps that suggested confidence rather than caution. Whoever was coming for us wasn't worried about being heard. "Got it," Hayes said as the window finally opened. "But it's a 10-foot drop to the garage roof and another 8 feet to the ground." "Better than staying here," I said. A voice called out from the hallway, distorted by some kind of electronic device but still recognizable as female. "Rowan? Lyra? I know you're up there. There's no point in hiding." "Who is that?" Hayes whispered. "I don't know, but she's working for Ember." "Come out and we can discuss this like civilized people," the voice continued. "I'm not here to hurt anyone unnecessarily." "Unnecessarily," Lyra whispered. "That's comforting." Hayes had climbed out onto the roof and was helping Lyra through the window. "Come on, Rowan. Let's go." But as I started to climb out, the bedroom door burst open and a figure appeared silhouetted against the hallway light. I could see the outline of someone wearing dark clothes and holding what looked like a gun. "Stop right there, Rowan. Come back inside." I froze half in and half out of the window. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been cleaning up other people's messes for far too long." The voice was clearer now without the electronic distortion. Familiar. "Dr. Chalmers?" Maddie stepped into the room, and in the dim light from the hallway, I could see her face clearly. My ex-girlfriend, the emergency room doctor who had treated Lyra after the poisoning, the woman I'd trusted with my sister's life. "Hello, Rowan. I'm sorry it has to be this way." "Maddie, what are you doing? Why are you here?" "I'm here because your wife made me a very generous offer, and I need the money more than I need my conscience." "You're working for Ember?" "I've been working for Ember for months. Who do you think provided her with the oleander extract? Who do you think made sure the toxicology results were accurate enough to be believable but not so detailed as to reveal the full extent of the planning?" My mind reeled. "You helped her poison Lyra?" "I helped her create a controlled poisoning that would make Lyra sick enough to be hospitalized, but not sick enough to suffer permanent damage. It was supposed to look like an accident. But it didn't look like an accident. Everyone knew it was deliberate. Because you dropped the cookies, and that pharmacy tech of yours noticed the oleander crystals. If the cookies had been consumed normally, the evidence would have been digested, and the symptoms would have looked like a severe allergic reaction. And then you would have treated Lyra for allergies instead of poisoning. Exactly. She would have recovered, you would have been suspected of causing her reaction somehow, and Ember would have been free to comfort you through the crisis while continuing her affair with Hayes. But when the plan failed, Ember asked you to finish the job. Ember asked me to clean up the loose ends, starting with Hayes, who knows too much, and ending with you and Lyra, who are too smart for your own good. From outside the window, I could hear Hayes and Lyra whispering urgently. They were probably trying to figure out whether to run for help or come back to assist me. Why, Maddie? Why would you do this? Because I'm drowning in student loan debt and malpractice insurance premiums, and Ember offered me enough money to solve all my problems. $500,000 for a few hours of work. This is more than a few hours of work. This is multiple felonies. This is survival, Rowan. You wouldn't understand. You've never had to choose between your ethics and your financial future. So you chose money over human lives. I chose money over a few inconvenient people who were standing in the way of other people's happiness. Maddie stepped closer, and I could see the weapon more clearly. It was small, likely a .22, but still capable of causing serious harm at close range. Now, I need you to call your sister and Hayes back inside. We're going to finish this tonight. Finish what? The plan. Ember may be confined, but her vision endures. Hayes is lost in a tragic mishap, perhaps a fall from this very roof. You and Lyra are believed to have perished under mysterious, intertwined circumstances. A grief-stricken brother, reeling from his wife's arrest and his sister's brush with disaster, breaks under the strain and moves to remove what he sees as the last sources of his turmoil. No one will believe that. They'll believe it when they find the suicide note you're going to write, confessing to the original poisoning attempt and explaining how guilt drove you to eliminate the witnesses. I'm not writing any suicide note. Yes, you are, because if you don't, I'll make sure your sister and Hayes suffer a lot more before they perish. Oleander poisoning is a terrible way to go, Rowan. Heart palpitations, seizures, respiratory failure. It can take hours. The threat was clear. Cooperate or watch my sister suffer. Okay, I said. I'll call them back. But instead of calling out to Lyra and Hayes, I shouted as loud as I could, "Run! Get help! Call the police!" Maddie cursed and raised the gun, but I was already moving. I threw myself back out the window, landing hard on the garage roof and rolling toward the edge. Behind me, I heard the gunfire twice, the bullets splintering the window frame where my head had been moments before. I rolled off the garage roof and hit the ground with an impact that knocked the wind out of me. Somewhere in the darkness, I could hear Lyra calling my name. "Here!" I gasped, struggling to my feet. "I'm here!" Hayes appeared beside me, helping me stand. "Are you hit?" "No, but we need to get out of here. Maddie's working for Ember. She's the one who provided the oleander." "Dr. Chalmers? The ER doctor?" "She's been part of this from the beginning." Lyra joined us, her phone in her hand. "I called 911. Police are on the way." "How long?" 5 minutes, maybe 10. From the house, we could hear Maddie moving around, probably searching for another way to reach us. The front and back doors were both options, and we were standing in an open yard with nowhere to hide. "We need to get to the neighbors," I said. But as we started across the yard, floodlights suddenly blazed to life, illuminating us like actors on a stage. Maddie had found the outdoor light switches. "Going somewhere?" Her voice carried across the yard from the back door. She was silhouetted against the light from inside the house, the gun clearly visible in her hand. "The police are coming," Lyra called out. "It's over. The police are 5 minutes away. That's plenty of time to finish this and disappear." Maddie started walking toward us, moving with the confident stride of someone who had already won. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd turned on the floodlights, which meant the neighbors could now see everything that was happening. Porch lights were starting to come on in the houses around us. People were looking out their windows, probably calling 911 themselves. "You're surrounded, Maddie," I said. "Half the neighborhood can see you pointing a gun at us." "Then I guess I better make this quick." She raised the gun, aiming at Hayes first. But before she could fire, a car came screaming around the corner with its headlights blazing and its engine roaring. Dean Morrison's pickup truck hit Maddie at about 20 miles per hour, sending her flying across the yard like a broken doll. The gun went spinning into the darkness. Dean jumped out of the truck and ran to where Maddie was lying motionless on the ground. "Is she breathing?" I checked for a pulse. "Barely. We need an ambulance." "Already called one, along with every cop in the county." "How did you know to come here?" "When you told me about that fake text, I started tracking the phone number. It traced back to a burner phone registered to a fake name, but the credit card used to buy it belonged to Dr. Maddie Chalmers." "So you knew she was involved?" "I suspected. When I dug deeper into Ember's background, I found some interesting connections. Turns out your wife and the good doctor have been friends since college, and Dr. Chalmers has been having some serious financial problems lately." Police sirens were getting louder, approaching from multiple directions. In the distance, I could also hear an ambulance. Hayes sat down heavily on Lyra's front steps. "Is it over? Please tell me it's finally over." "It's over," Lyra said, putting her arm around him. "For better or worse, it's over." But I wasn't so sure. As I watched the paramedics work on Maddie, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were still pieces of this puzzle I didn't understand. Ember was too smart and too careful to put all her trust in one accomplice. If Maddie was working for her, there might be others. Detective Givens arrived with the cavalry, 6 police cars and a crime scene van. She took our statements while the paramedics loaded Maddie into an ambulance, and by the time we finished talking, it was nearly midnight. "We'll need you all to come to the station tomorrow for formal statements," Detective Givens said. "But for tonight, I'd recommend staying somewhere other than your own homes, just in case." "In case of what?" Lyra asked. "In case Dr. Chalmers wasn't working alone." The 3 of us ended up at a hotel on the outskirts of town, sharing a 2-bedroom suite and trying to process everything that had happened. Hayes called his brother to let him know he was safe. Lyra called the hospital to arrange for time off, and I called the pharmacy to tell Tony I wouldn't be in for a few days. "So what happens now?" Hayes asked as we sat in the hotel's small kitchenette area, drinking coffee and trying to stay awake. "Now we wait," I said. "We wait for the police to finish their investigation, for the lawyers to sort out the charges, and for the media circus to die down." "What about us?" Lyra asked Hayes. "What happens to our marriage?" Hayes looked down at his coffee cup. "I don't know. I know I've destroyed your trust, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'd like to try to earn it back, if you'll let me. That's going to take time. A lot of time." "I understand. And therapy. Lots and lots of therapy. Whatever it takes." I left them to work out their relationship issues and went to my room to try to get some sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maddie pointing that gun at us, or Ember standing in our kitchen lying about the cookies, or the look of recognition in Tony's eyes when he realized the cookies were poisoned. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The game isn't over yet, Rowan. Ember sends her regards." I stared at the message, my heart racing. Someone else was still out there, still working for my wife, still planning to finish what she'd started. I forwarded the message to Detective Givens and tried to convince myself that it was just someone playing a cruel prank. But deep down, I knew better. Ember Kerrick was a planner, and planners always had backup plans. I spent the rest of the night sitting by the hotel room window, watching the parking lot and waiting for dawn. Somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond the streetlights, someone was planning my destruction. But this time, I would be ready for them.